Welcome to Partners in Ministry. I'm your host, Dan Smith, and today I'll be talking with Teahl Bader. Teahl is the Executive Director of Single Parent Provision in West Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome, Teahl, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
To get started, why don't you just give us a brief history of single parent provision?
So brief is the tricky word there, but I'll do my best. The short version of that, we've existed formally for about 12 years. Ultimately, this started and was birthed out of pain in my own journey of being a single mother and having been raised by a single father. And ultimately, God planted a seed, and that's where the origins of everything began. We've been going strong ever since.
When did you start? When did your ministry?
2013.
2013. Okay, so you're finishing up on your 12th year almost.
Yep.
That's pretty big. Time does go fast, doesn't it?
Yep, it does.
As you take time to look back at the past experiences that birthed this ministry, how can you see God preparing you to do what he wants you to do today for him?
I can see, none of us ever like to go through hard things, but he often uses those hard things to equip us for the future endeavors that he has planned. And I absolutely see that to be true in my own life and in my own walk. I am a single mom. I have a 17-year-old daughter. So just over 17 years ago, when I found out I was expecting my daughter, was a very hard and dark time in my own life. I wasn't married, and I was clearly doing things outside of marriage that I shouldn't have been doing and wouldn't do now. But I found myself expecting my daughter, and the very first person who I told was a coworker of mine who she was a single mom, and she had confided in me also that years prior she had had an abortion. And she's the first person I told, and I remember sitting out on her back porch, just sobbing and crying and scared. But I knew that in the still of all of that even though my daughter was a surprise to me, she wasn't a surprise to God, in that he very intentionally created her and trusted me to be her mom. And so I'm giving you the microwave version of it, but it's, you don't come to those clear conclusions necessarily just, as quickly as I'm speaking of them. It came from a lot of pain and a lot of hurt, but ultimately, even though I was saved from a young age, I often reflect back to that time of sitting on my friend's porch, as that was the first time for me, even though I knew Jesus as Savior and I knew my eternity was safe. It wasn't until that moment where I finally allowed Jesus to be not just Savior, but also to be Lord. And I knew that, again, like I said, he very intentionally created her, and so here we go. And it was going to be not my will, but yours, Lord. And so I can see, fast forward 17 years and having been in, doing the ministry for 12 plus years, my own journey of being a single mom and what I walked through absolutely plays into equipping me for leading this ministry now. Uniquely also, not only am I a single mom, but I was raised by a single father. So my mom passed away when I was 9 months old, and my dad raised all four of us kids on his own. So I speak from a personal side when you talk about, how have past experiences equipped from a personal side, that those journeys of both my upbringing and then my own journey have absolutely given me a heart for single parents. And then professionally too, you look back and the majority of my career has been spent in nonprofits, and you're just kind of going from one thing to the next of following God in the path he has for you. And when you look back and you can see how all those different things have just aligned to have you exactly where he wants you now and doing what you're doing. So
yeah. I always find it interesting how God uses what we think is the end or the result of bad decisions all of a sudden ends up being the beginning of a new venture where he turns right around and uses that as, okay, now here's what we're going to do going forward. And it's so cool to see how that's happening for you too. When we say the word single parent, obviously a lot of us come up with all these different ideas about what that looks like. But to clarify, give us an idea of what that looks like from your perspective in terms of the people that you're serving. Who are these people? What do they look like? Where do they come from?
I really appreciate the question because you're spot on. Everyone's going to come up with some conclusion of what that looks like for them. And what we see to be true is, somebody who is not married and who has children and is raising children is a single parent. And the way in which someone becomes a single parent there can be a lot of journeys to get there. That can happen from someone who's never been married, someone who has gone through a divorce, someone who is widowed, and then the smallest percentage, but it's still absolutely a part of it, is there are some who have become a single parent through adoption, where they are a single person and they've chosen to adopt. And so the mix of all of that is the makeup of who we serve.
So it's going to be a wide variety of age groups, backgrounds, male, female. I mean, it's just about anybody.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And one of the things that I often say is, regardless of the way in which someone becomes a single parent, a common thread amongst all of them is that most single parents don't expect to become one. You don't grow up as a child and envision that. And usually when that journey begins, these are a set of circumstances that are kind of thrust upon you and that you're not expecting. And that's one of the real values that I see that God brings from this ministry is any of us, as I started this conversation, when we go through hard times it's just that it's hard. And you're often trying to, look for people who have been where you've been. And so just out of God's just beautiful love that he's created a ministry where single parents, regardless of the way in which that journey begins, that they can reach out and there's a landing place for them. And that I, praise Jesus is anchored in him and can provide that landing place to single parents.
Yeah. How do people find out about you? I mean, how do they hear about single parent provision?
So almost entirely it's through word of mouth. So I will just give you to quantify a few things. So in our very first year, we served 223 single parents and children. Last year, we served over 3,064. So, and almost that entirely comes from single parents telling other single parents. We have $0 that we spend towards some type of marketing budget or anything like that. It's all just single parents telling other single parents. And for us trying to bring excellence to the services and programming that we do provide. And so then certainly when we're, doing different things or kicking off new things or whatever, we're telling those, who we've already served. But it's just mostly single parents telling other single parents. Clearly we do have a website and things in which they can find us and whatnot. But usually someone has told somebody else about single parent provision, and that's what drives them to reach out.
Sure. Well, what kind of services are you providing? How are you helping?
Yeah, so that too is a long list of things that we provide, but ultimately we try to look at the single parent journey and look at what are the common threads. There's always going to be unique circumstances that individuals will find themselves, but what are the common denominators that the majority of single parents are experiencing, and how can we step into those spaces with them? For instance, again, a common thread amongst, if I could put on a piece of paper all the words that I hear described or, that people share when, discussing their journey, the number one word that we would hear the most of is alone, is feeling alone. And we know that God created us for community and to do life alongside others. And so out of all the programming and things we provide, what we put a premium on are the groups that we provide. So we have different single moms groups and then a single fathers group that meet throughout the Des Moines metro. And where single parents come, some will ask, is that a Bible study? or, oh, is that a support group? And the answer is yes and yes. But we very intentionally just refer to it as, it's a single mom's group or a single father's group. And it's amazing, again, especially those who follow Jesus. We have hearts of service. We're to be the church, and be Jesus's hands and feet. And it's amazing, though, what can happen by just creating a healthy environment for single moms or single fathers to come and to build relationships with others who are traveling, a similar journey, and where the focus is on Jesus. It's amazing how many things can take care of themselves just being around, good people and having good people along your side. For instance, I'll tell you, there was one time where there was a single mom who she was looking at, she wanted to get a second job on the weekends that she didn't have her daughter. And so her, she was saying how she had an interview, but, come up, but it was during a time when, she had her daughter who was really young. And then one of the moms just spoke up and said, well, I'll take care of her while you have the interview. It's around dinner time. I'll feed her. And well, that might not sound, some huge, epiphany or something. When I go back to right what I started with, when the majority of single parents are that feeling of being alone. And when you are feeling like you're on an island, and the sole person responsible for, raising this family and doing so in a dynamic that you never expected to be in, when you see those walls of feeling alone start to break down, and when that genuine support can be fostered, so many things can take care of themselves. And so, to answer your question about some of the things that we provide, the groups is one of the things that we provide around the area that we really put a premium on. If I got to write the script for any single parent, it would be that they get plugged into a group. A snapshot of some of just the other, again, the focusing on the common denominators that we see that, the majority of single parents experience. We know that single parents often feel overwhelmed. And so we provide a program that's called Break Time, where single parents can bring their kids. It's all free. We take care of the kids, allowing them to have some personal time for themselves. And again, that's not a rocket science program, but we know our audience and we know what is needed. And again, we can think about the, like a basic needs type of thing. If somebody, needs, has basic needs, we think of kind of go into fix it mode. And I say we, I'm saying the church or humans or people, But if we can look at, okay, what are these ongoing things that are going to reoccur in the journey of a single parent, and how can we step into those spaces and provide those supports along the way? Because there isn't going to be just one thing that you can provide for somebody that's going to just magically make it all okay and magically just make it, just be easy and, make the grief of, the situation go away. But when we can project out and see, okay, throughout this journey, what are those potholes that are going to show up? What are those ongoing needs that are going to be in there? And then we provide those ongoing supports. That's how we help them sustain. It's not someone once gave this, so this is not an original example, but somebody once gave the example of the Good Samaritan and the innkeeper. And, where some people maybe are focused on the Good Samaritan work and some are the innkeeper, which is more of the long haul. I would say there's elements of what we do that that fit into both of those categories, but we are definitely looking at the long game for them. Sometimes just some little ongoing deposits of support, like those ongoing groups, like that ongoing break time program. It helps keep their arms up. It helps them moving forward. I'll just give you some other snapshot ones, but we have a program that's called Home Provision. So single parents can submit requests of things that they need help with around their home. And then we work with the local churches and deploy volunteer groups from the local church to the homes of single parents to help with different projects and repairs that they have around their home. Again, I am pleased that this isn't a rocket science program, so to speak, but, when we can mobilize the church to be the hands and feet and to show up for single parents who are feeling alone, and who, are feeling like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and we can be burden bearers alongside of them, it makes all the difference in the world. So our home provision, then we provide different workshops and classes throughout the year. And then we have some events I'll speak to, but I'll just say, some of what I touched on earlier. One of the real values that I see that we're able to provide is a landing place for single parents. When that journey begins, just to be able to know that there's a place with their hands raised that they can reach out to, who can help them take a deep breath, help them see the forest through the trees, be that guide along this journey that is anchored in Jesus, because, we're not trying to be the saviors. We're trying to connect them with the Savior. And that's really our heart posture behind all that we do, helping them grow anchored in Him. Lastly, I'll just talk about, a handful of the events that we do. So again, I'll just say all that we do is for all single parents, but we very intentionally and unapologetically at times provide things specific for single mothers or specific for single fathers. And so we have two big outreach events that we do. So our annual Single Moms Christmas Dinner, it happens downtown at the Iowa Event Center. There'll be over 2,000 single mothers and children who will attend. It takes over 400 volunteers to make that all possible. And again, we know that the feeling of being alone can be magnified at Christmas time. And so that's why this event was originally birthed. And it is a time where, just encouragement, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful evening that is anchored in Jesus, and where we have just a front row seat, so to speak, to or opportunity to be able to encourage their hearts, point them to Jesus, and again, step into that space when they are feeling alone, and show them otherwise. One of our prayers for that is, Lord, overwhelm their hearts with you. And that's what we ultimately see, that happens through that event. And the last event, I guess I'll talk about, we do an outreach event for single fathers in the summer that has a similar heart posture, but is executed completely different. It's a totally different type of event, where again, brings single fathers together to connect with others and help build community.
Well, that is awesome. It really is interesting to hear you talk about how community really is the foundation of everything. So once they join the community, then they have a place to express what the need is. And then that allows you to then mobilize yourself to try to find people in and outside of that community to meet that need. And that's really what's kind of going on. Give us some idea of the transformation that you typically see that's happening. For instance, someone will say, here's what it was like for me before. Here's what happened when I got involved with single parents, and this is what life is for me now. Give us some examples of that transformation.
A couple of them come to mind. So I'll tell you one story. Her name is Christine. And so she, this was probably almost, I don't know exactly the time frame how, but she had called our office one time. I was the only one here at the time, and I answered the phone and said, single parent provision, this is Teahl. And she got on the phone, and she got a few words out of her mouth. She called on a Thursday, and she was calling to inquire about a program, our break time program that was happening that Saturday. So she got a few words out of her mouth, and she's just crying through her questions. So I let her finish, and I answered her questions, and I just said, are you okay? And she said, I know I'm not the only person who have ever gone through this, but right now I feel like I am, and I feel so alone. And then she said, you are a single mom, right? And I said, well, I am a single mom. And to come to find out, she'd gone to our website. She had, when I answered the phone and said, this is Teahl, she had seen something about my story of origin. And so she knew she was talking to, a single mom. And I pause right there in the story, because that's what I see, the opportunity that we have over and above in that moment. I could have led her down any path, and there's nothing special about me. But I say all that because there are so few places for a single parent to reach out to and to be understood, so to speak. And because we are that, and because we're anchored in Jesus, we have the opportunity to steer them down a path that involves dependency on Jesus. And so, long story short, we continued the call, and I was telling her about break time and answering those questions. And then we had made a plan that we would meet Monday morning after she dropped her kids off at daycare and before she went to work. And so we were going to meet then, and we finished up the conversation. And I just said, Christine, I don't know if you're a person of faith, but would it be okay if I pray with you? And she started to cry again. And she said, I used to be, but I'm so far from that right now. And I said, well, would it be okay if I pray with you? And she said yes. And so we prayed together on the phone. And when we got done, she just breathlessly said, thank you. And so we finished the call. That was Thursday. She came and brought her boys to our break time program on Saturday. We met Monday morning. And again, anytime that we're meeting with a single parent, we always encourage them to get plugged into a group. And that group, the one that was close to her, was meeting that upcoming Wednesday night. So that Wednesday night, she came to the group. She brought her boys, so they got plugged into the Awana program that was happening in conjunction with it. And so here's somebody from, in a week's time, where a week prior, in her own words, she said, as far as being a person of faith, she said, I used to be, but I'm so far from that right now. That here's evidence in her story too, where God used this very hard time in her life, but she reached out, and through our interactions that we were able to have, somebody who a week prior was, so far from that. And then fast forward to Wednesday, and here she is getting plugged into a group that's meeting into a church that her boys are plugged into that. And you fast forward years later, she is such a woman of God, and is just thriving, and her boys are thriving. And she was faithful to come to that group for many, many years. And, they're just actively involved in the church now. And, it was just remarkable to see that. And I think those are the stories that I gravitate towards. We have just another one. Ashley was very similar, but someone had told her that, hey, there's a single moms group coming. And she, again, in her own words, had walked away from her faith from a long time ago, but she heard about this group. So she knew there was a place for her. And she came, and now in her own words, she's got accountability partners who they always make sure that that they go to church together. They sit at church together on Sundays. And it all started from just an invitation to come to one of our groups that we very intentionally hold within the local church. And those are there's many others, when you talk about transformation, there's many other ways. There's ways you can define that. But for me, anytime that we can see where we've been able to impact, not only lightening their load, but connecting them back to Jesus, there is no greater help that any of us can provide than that, is to help usher hearts closer to Him and help, grow their dependency on Him. And I see that happen all the time. And so those are my favorite ones to point to.
Sure. So do you partner intentionally with any other organizations or group? And if so, what role do they play in your overall ministry?
Yep. So the first thing I would just say would just be the local church. That's number one. I talked about our home provision program. That is exclusively like volunteers from the church are going to the homes of single parents to help with those. So we, just partner with, I think there's over 30 churches that we work with, and that plays a huge part of it. And it goes both ways. We see that. So we just had like a church reach out yesterday who came in contact with a single mom. I don't know all the details yet, but they reached out to us and said, hey, we have this single mom. Here's what's going on. What can we do? And because of those partnerships and relationships, not only can we go to the church to mobilize volunteers to go serve, but then similarly, when they have single parents that come into their church and need community, need that support and those ongoing supports that we provide throughout their journey, then we can serve as a resource for them as well. And so it's just a beautiful relationship. I would say outside of the church, there's multiple other Christ-centered nonprofits who are in similar, what I would look at it as like a continuum of care. So whereas there can be pregnancy centers who in the area who they might intercept a parent at the point when, they've conceived a child. Well, let's say that, Lord willing, hopefully that they, parents chooses life. And so, and they would be helping them through that pregnancy. But once the child is here, again, we know as parents, the real work begins once the child is here.
Right.
And so again, that's where the baton gets passed to us, so to speak, because for that duration of their journey, they're going to need a lot of ongoing support, and that's where we provide. So there's local pregnancy centers that we work with, transitional housing types of things, multiple that I would say feed into that continuum of care.
Well, how have these partners impacted your ability to serve?
The ability to serve, I don't know that I would maybe.
What are you able to do? Let me rephrase that. What are you able to do with partners that you couldn't without them?
I would say, again, I would put it back in the perspective of what would that journey for the parent be like if we weren't working together? And so I'll kind of answer it in that regard, that, if we were all these individual silos and we weren't helping for that continuum of care to happen, and if we weren't working together to foster that, what a disservice that would be to those who we are trying to serve. So the mom who is expecting a child, if they were able to, if they were able to, yes, the baby arrived and was healthy and maybe had some initial support right there. But then if we weren't working together where we can, there can be a handoff between them and here, then what? Now we've created another type of crisis, so to speak, unintentionally perhaps. But if we aren't working together, then it's a lot of stop and start where, one fire is put out, but another one is created. And by us working together, that doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to be, there's an emergency here, that's taken care of. Now there's another emergency. And I would say, I think that's the biggest benefit that, us working together provides, is just ultimately better care for those in which we're serving.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, give us an example of something you've been able to celebrate recently.
Oh, goodness. There's been a few, and can I ask you a question in that? Do you mean more so in the life of a parent or just in the overall ministry as a whole?
Either
way. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I would just say God's provision. Even a couple of years ago, when I talk about those numbers in which that we serve, there's going from serving, just over 200 to now over 3,000 in a relatively short period of time. And those numbers are not slowing down. And so what gives me the most amount of gray hairs on my head is seeing that of knowing that the growth of families in which we are serving is far going so much faster than the rate in which, the resources needed to support it are growing. But you trust God and you know that, He's in charge of those numbers. He's bringing them. And ultimately, it's more of a responsibility on Him than it is on us to provide for their needs. So we look to Him, and sometimes that can get really scary, so to speak. And I will say, we've talked about it. We referred to it as like the cliff effect, where we've seen, the the rate in which the families we're serving is going, like this steep, and the resources are also growing in the right direction, but not nearly at the same rate. And even just in 2024, we had just we knew that was eventually going to be an issue, but you keep walking, you keep praying, you keep discerning. Lord, what is there something we're doing we should stop doing? Is there something we need to do that, start doing, so to speak? And to hit that point of tension, I guess I would say, and continue to just, pray and seek, and then to see him provide. And so you talk about celebrating a win, to see him, provide in such intimate ways. That's just been a huge win. And I would say, the Quakerdale Foundation is a part of that story, in provision in that, and just how he's orchestrated different relationships and the ways in which he's come through. And I'll tell you the story because it's worth sharing, but to put more legs to what I'm talking about, the end of our fiscal year in 2024, again, when we, had reached that, the difference in, resources versus those served. And it was the last day of our fiscal year. And I remember waking up that morning, and my spiritual mentor used to tell me that God's favorite words are, I can't and I quit. And she said that in the spirit of just full surrender, that when we can say, Lord, I can't, sometimes it brings us to just that what can feel like the 11th hour, but where we feel like we've done all these things, and when we're finally, fully surrendered, and the space that allows God to move. And so I remember the last day of our fiscal year, again, things were challenged, and that morning waking up saying, Lord, I can't and I quit, as far as, it was a little similarly what I said before, you'll have to provide. You'll have to provide. So that was early in the morning. That day, I came into the office, and about 11:30 that day, I was headed out to meet with someone, and the phone rang, and I wasn't the one who answered it, but someone on our team was in our conference room. And I could tell, her eyes were big, and I was getting ready to walk out, and she gave me a motion such as this of, hold on. And so I was waiting, and I get done, and she has me come in, shuts the door, and she proceeded to tell me that we had no idea that any of this was happening, but there was a local business that basically had pooled their employees of, they had tossed it out to them of what are, places that you would want our company to support. And long story short, we got selected, and that came with a gift of $20,000.
Wow.
And that showed, not only is that just amazing. And I'll say, when she told me that, I had my bag on my shoulder, I dropped my bag, and I walked out our front door, and I just started walking with God and just praising him, because not only did he provide financially in the way that a way that we needed, but the way he chose to do it. Here, this was the last day of our fiscal year. I just, and that morning saying to him, I can't, I quit, so to speak, in my heart with him. And for it to be that day, just hours later, the way that he provided, it was so intimate. His care and love and provision was so intimate. And so, it was just an amazing, and the ripple effect from that, he just continues to show himself and continues to show his provision for the overall ministry and in the lives of those that we serve. And it's just pretty special.
Yeah, that's awesome. If there's somebody that's either listening to or watching this broadcast, and they're going, you know what, I really need to check out what's going on here, and I would like to see how I could be involved in the ministry of what you're doing, what would be their first step?
I would go to our website or give us a call. I'm available. I love to talk ministry, and we love to love single parents, and we love to represent Jesus to the flock in which we serve. And so if someone has a heart and has interest in helping do the same, I'd love to have a conversation with them. So they can give us a call, or they can go to our website. Would be a great place to start.
And finally, just before we sign off here, how can we pray for you personally as well as Single Parent Provision this week?
I really, really, really appreciate just the question and asking for that. I'll say for myself, I mentioned I have a 17-year-old daughter who is a senior in high school. And so my emotions, the fact that she is a senior, they're always right there at the surface. So if you wanted to pray for me, I would appreciate just prayers for just this transitional time in our lives. And I would appreciate personally prayer to that end. So as far as the ministry, I would just pray. I mentioned the Christmas event that we have, that we need, over 400 volunteers to make it possible. I would pray for God's provision and working in the hearts to move hearts for people to serve. That would be a huge prayer request for us, just the
Sure.
volunteers to serve.
I always enjoy adding things to my what I call my prayer calendar. What day or what's the date of that event, so I can add that to my calendar.
December 6th, Saturday, December 6th.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Teahl, I just really want to thank you for taking the time to share us a little bit about you, to get to know you as well as your ministry. So thank you so very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
If you've got any questions, or if you'd like to learn more about Single Parent Provision, you can see their contact information right here on the screen. You can also find it in the show notes for this episode on our website, or you can find it right here in the description of this YouTube video. If you'd like to support Single Parent Provision financially, you can find links to do so both on our show notes as well as the YouTube description. Finally, please consider sending an email of support and encouragement to Teahl and Single Parent Provision. Let them know that you're thinking about them and praying for them. So on behalf of Single Parent Provision, Teahl Bader, and Partners in Ministry, I want to thank you for joining us today. And until next time, let's get out there and serve as Christ serves.